afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone.
Yes, good afternoon, Pinaki.
Am I audible clearly?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You are audible, Shushmita, but not visible.
Yeah, I know that.
Welcome, sir.
Welcome.
So I think you're muted.
Hello, hello.
Yes, sir. You're audible. You're audible. Ma'am, shall we begin?
Yes, please.
Good evening and welcome everyone, especially our honorable guest and speaker, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, respected Secretary, College Governing Council, Dr. Shapon Kumar Mukherjee, respected Principal Ma'am, Dr. Madhu Manjari Mandal, respected Vice Principal Sir, Dr. Supratim Das, respected Ex-Principal Ma'am, Dr. Arpita Mukherjee, respected Bursa Ma'am, Dr. Rajyoshi Ghosh, Coordinator Sir, IQAC, Dr. Samrat Bhattacharya, Secretary Teachers Council, Dr. Amitabh Roy, respected HOD, Department of Business Administration, Professor Vivach Acharya, other dignitaries present, dear colleague, beloved students, ladies and gentlemen. We have already experienced nearly 16 months of claustrophobia, where our movements were literally restricted within our house walls. Why? Because an invisible killer is out in open, ambushing to pounce on us, waiting to catch us off guard. That's what has been our journey in the COVID era so far. We have quietly observed slightly less than 40 lakh people worldwide getting obliterated without even a single shot fired. Though ironically, the whole world now is desperately wanting to get shot to prevent this menace. But somewhere we have failed as humans to erect a strong defensive wall in front of COVID. Maybe because we all are still very much divided into three sections, mainly informed people, uninformed people, and the most dangerous of them lot, misinformed people. Hence, to educate and aware people with the right kind of information, Department of Business Administration and Internal Quality Assurance Cell of Scottish Church College invited the very best in this domain to kindly present his deliberations on today's webinar, Prevention is Better Than Cure, COVID-19 and Introspection. I welcome you all in this webinar, and as this Scottish legacy stands before anything good, we submit ourselves to the Almighty. Therefore, may I now request Dr. Shushmita Gonzalez from Department of Political Science to lead us into opening prayer. Over to you, ma'am.
Heavenly Father, let us all close our eyes and look up to Him. Heavenly Father, gracious Lord, Creator of heaven and earth, as we are gathered in your holy name, we praise you and adore you. Almighty God, hear our prayer and bless today's seminar. Prevention is better than cure, COVID-19 and introspection. We pray for our college, respected Secretary, College Governing Council, Dr. Shapon Kumar Mukherjee, respected Principal Ma'am, Dr. Madhu Manjari Mandal, respected Vice Principal, Dr. Supratim Das, respected Ex-Principal, Dr. Arpita Mukherjee, and our IQAC Coordinator, Bursar, and Secretary Teachers Council. We also pray for the Department of Business Administration of our college, Dr. Vivach Acharya, HOD, and for each and every teacher and student attending today's program. We are grateful for our respected and honorable speaker, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, Senior Vice Chairman and Chief Cardiac Surgeon, Medica Hospital. Gracious Lord, send us your Holy Spirit to be our guide and give us the wisdom to understand every topic that we are going to hear and discuss. Enlighten our minds and remain with us. We thank you, Father, for this precious time that you have given us. All this we pray through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Gonzalez, for creating the right kind of ambience for today's evening. May I now request our respected Principal Ma'am, Dr. Madhumanjari Mondol, to kindly deliver the welcome address. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Pinaki. Good evening, everyone. Dr. Shapan Kumar Mukherjee, Honorable Secretary, Governing Body of Scottish Church College, Dr. Supratim Das, Honorable Vice Principal, Dr. Shamrat Bhattacharya, our IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Rajashree Ghosh, Bursar of the College, and our Honorable Chief Guest of today's webinar, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, Senior Vice Chairman and Chief Cardiac Surgeon, Medica Hospital. I welcome you, sir. I'm grateful to you that you could manage your very busy schedule to come to our college for delivering and sharing your thoughts on the topic, Prevention is Better Than Cure, COVID-19 and Introspection. This proverb we have learned from our childhood, but this is the time when we will have to practice it in our life for our survival. Precautions which we must follow in COVID-19 situation will be discussed by our honorable speaker. And it is a fact that we know them also. But the question arises whether we are following them or not. And this is the time for introspection in this regard. Let us be very serious about it. I would like to appreciate Mr. Vivash Acharya, Head Department of Business Administration, and Dr. Shamrat Bhattacharya, IQAC Coordinator, for organizing such a wonderful webinar. I welcome my colleagues, my dear students, guests, and wish you all the best.
Thank you, ma'am, for this wonderful welcome address. Now we'll proceed towards listening to another address by a respected Secretary, College Governing Council, Dr. Swapan Kumar Mukherjee. May I now request, sir, to kindly deliver his address. Over to you, sir.
Most Honorable Dr. Kunal Sarkar,
বলতে আরম্ভ করে সে নিজে যে স্মৃতিকথায় আকৃষ্ট হয়ে পড়েছে।
Most Honorable Dr. Kunal Sarkar, respected Principal Dr. Madhumanjari Mandal, Vice Principal Dr. Supratim Das, Dr. Shamrat Bhattacharya, IQAC Coordinator, Professor Vivash Acharya, Head of the Department of BBA, Dr. Rajashree Ghosh, Bursar of the College, and our dear teachers and students. We have assembled in a virtual platform to hear the deliberations of the esteemed speaker, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, the renowned cardiothoracic surgeon in Kolkata, on the topic, Prevention is Better Than Cure, COVID-19 and Introspection. The topic is an old saying, social saying, in the perspective of a hitherto unknown virus COVID-19. Dr. Sarkar has reputation in giving expert public opinion in various media on COVID precautions, protection,
সঠিক হয়তো
care, and
আজকালকার দিনে বড় একটা দেখা যায় না।
sometimes critical on government policy. We all know that COVID had an extensive impact in our lives, healthcare, economy, social and family life, as most of us had experience of direct or indirect effect of coronavirus in our lives. We lost many of our near and dear ones and many known persons. Many of us or our own people were also saved by the doctors working continuously in hospitals where at one point of time the resources like beds, oxygen, ventilators were very limited in supply. We talk about the deaths of many ordinary people, neglect by the doctors, and also failure of the government. But have we ever thought of the plight of doctors working in COVID hospitals? Nearly 1,200 doctors lost, lost their lives in India while discharging their professional obligations for COVID affected patients. A week back, I was listening to a direct telecast of the plight of doctors in the form of interview in CNN news channel under the program named Healing of Doctors. It was no less pathetic than the state of COVID patients or their relatives. Pressure of admission, dearth of beds, infrastructure, ventilator, oxygen, and prolonged duty hours in PPE led to depression, exhaustion, and sometimes confusion. Sometimes unfortunate decision is to be taken which patient has to be given priority while having limitation in the infrastructure like ventilator. They could not even sleep for 6 hours at a stretch without attending phone calls for COVID patients. A doctor couple could not even visit their only 4-year child for 1 month because COVID precautions for family restricted them. Literally, doctors were in tears while expressing their anguish and heart for the patient. Even now, doctors are beaten and tortured. Luckily, they were hard pressed yet not broken. They also require physical and mental healing, which was the essence of the program Healing of Doctors. The common people must have to understand the other side of the story. Dr. Kunal Sarkar is an eminent speaker with depth on the subject. His eloquence and spontaneity in media or debate are worth mentioning. While thanking him on behalf of the College Management Council, I wish his speech and interaction will be enriching for all of us joining this platform. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir, for enumerating this lucid address to everyone. We are indeed enriched. Now, may I humbly request our respected Vice Principal, sir, Dr. Supratim Das, to kindly deliver his address. Over to you, sir. Sir, you're muted. If you could kindly unmute yourself.
Respected dignitaries, distinguished guests, dear colleagues and dear students. We are now more than 1 year into the COVID-19 pandemic, and before anything this evening, I must convey my endless gratitude to the doctors' fraternity for whatever they have done for society since the beginning of this pandemic. Now, the World Health Organization continues to state that masks are a key measure to suppress transmission and save lives. Use of mask, physical distancing, hand hygiene, and in worst situations, lockdowns. All these are recommended to prevent the spread of coronavirus infection. But as a common man, I am a bit confused. Till date, I am not sure if surface contacts may or may not cause an infection. Whether vegetables, fruits, fish, or meat that are fresh from the market should be washed with clean water, or we should use permissible disinfectants. Because there are contradictory opinions from medical experts, virologists, and healthcare persons. We know that vaccine cannot prevent the pandemic, but vaccine can substantially reduce the virulence of infection. I took my first Covishield vaccine on 6th April, and the second dose was officially scheduled on 21st May. Now it has been rescheduled on 2nd July, that is, after a gap of 12 weeks. Now, I suffered from COVID-19 infection in between. In that case, after how many days from the onset of symptoms, I am eligible to take my second jab. ICMR guideline dated 19th May 2021 says 3 months after recovery. In that case, I have two issues. First, is it a guideline issued on purely medical ground, or there are other calculations? Secondly, does this interval include 17 days from the date of positive report plus 3 months? Here also I face contradictory opinions from esteemed doctors, in fact all over the country. Finally, most of the people I know and see around me have not yet received their first dose of the vaccine. Either they cannot financially afford to take it, or they are still not able or fortunate enough to take a free vaccine. My college, however, has successfully arranged a vaccination camp for our teachers, their close relations, and the non-teaching staff. But at the end of the day, how far have we progressed towards a standard policy of prevention of the pandemic? I am a teacher. My concern is about my students. Our semester 2 students will perhaps appear for their Calcutta University examination in August this year. So they will complete a year in the college. Only a few of them have ever visited the college in person. This is unfortunate, but this is true. We solemnly instruct our students about online mode or blended mode of teaching and learning. We proudly provide them digital platforms, but we cannot assure them of a perfect mode of prevention. And we know coronavirus has, of course, today a vaccine, but pedagogy has no vaccine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. It has been quite an intriguing address indeed, because it has raised some valid questions which might be answered during the technical session, we presume. And keeping that in mind, we will carry on with our proceedings. And before we move on to our technical session, may I make some very basic announcements that I would be requesting everyone to kindly keep yourself muted all throughout this session and write all your questions and queries in the chat box, which will be read out to the speaker after his deliberation is over. And there would be one feedback form which would be shared with you at the time of our vote of thanks, maybe shortly after that. So stay tuned, do not immediately log out after the speaker is done with his speech. Now it is the time for us to move on to our technical sessions. And before that, I may take the privilege to introduce our respected speaker, who needs no introduction. He is currently the Senior Vice Chairman and Chief Cardiac Surgeon, as everyone has already mentioned, in Medica Hospital. Our speaker is one of the prominent faces in this part of the country who does not fear to speak his mind about the subjects pertaining to human health and welfare. He is the strongest voice, rather, I would say, advocating to deliver the COVID vaccines at the doorsteps for better prevention. Someone who is a specialist in heart and who would rather speak from his heart today. Ladies and gentlemen, our speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Kunal Sarkar. Welcome, sir, and over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mondal. I hope I'm audible. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Right. Thank you for your very generous and warm introduction. Right, and to all the senior faculty members, and especially I think Professor Das, who gave us quite a few sort of pointers that we should discuss. It has not only been his questions, but questions of many, many other people. Now, naturally, it is an old habit. I have inculcated of more than 35 years back when I was pacing the streets of Scotland up and down, especially the streets of Edinburgh, because my romance with Scotland goes back more than 3.5 decades in pursuing the fellowships of not just one Scottish college, but 2 Scottish colleges. And there was a stage of my life when I used to think that all the grey stones that ornamented the streets of Edinburgh, I could probably number them and recite them by heart. The grey stones of Nicholson Street, I used to call them. You've had a very nice heading to this session. Prevention is better than cure. Prevention is better than cure was said in the mid-1500s. And in the mid-1500s, in mid-1500 in Europe, what was happening? In Europe was going through the phase of it is like the second phase of the European Renaissance, what is called the Cinquecento. And in the second phase of the European Renaissance, you had a wise Dutch philosopher who was again, could stand shoulder to shoulder with any of the Italian polymaths like Leonardo da Vinci and his company. And his name was Desiderius Erasmus. So it was Desiderius Erasmus who came up with these pearls of wisdom that prevention is better than cure. And extremely, extremely well said. That very nice name for a management. Now to get back to the history, in Scottish Church College, I was looking it up somewhere, that Scottish Church College probably came into existence in the 1830s, in the 1830, 1831. And apart from, once again, my bias towards anything which is set up by a missionary, because they educated me for 12 years of my life. I wasn't educated by Scottish missionaries, I was educated by Jesuit missionaries. But remember what was happening in the world in the 1830s. In the 1830s, in the beginning of the 19th century, the world was probably seeing one epidemic or the other, and an epidemic used to happen probably 3 times a year. And the 1830s was the era for the great cholera epidemics. Cholera used to happen. It was almost like a seasonal fair. It would come, people would be absolutely helpless in the front of cholera, and the streets of Calcutta even. Calcutta at that stage was obviously the capital of the British India, and even at that stage, there are numerous records. The streets of Calcutta and Mumbai would be littered with bodies from the cholera epidemics. You never had great pandemics in that era. Pandemic is something that spread across the world. Why did you not have pandemics? You did not have pandemics because the world was not so interconnected. A virus. So like the virus spreads out in no time from China to Iran, Iran to Italy, Italy to North America, and does a world tour in its own course. It would be very difficult to do that in early 19th century. Really, going by the connectivity we had in those era. So that is why when you think of the world in the pre-aviation age, you think of epidemics and not so much of pandemics. Fair enough. What have we learned? It'll take a great long time to trace back the life history of the virus, but what we have definitely learned within the last 1 month is with a great deal of certainty that this virus by no means was generated in a kind of a natural species. This virus was very much a product of bent science This was very much a product of misled scientific research, research that happened in the labs of Wuhan. It will be very, very simplistic to point a finger to a couple of Chinese people and say that the Chinese were playing mischief with the world. No, it didn't happen that way. Most probably what happened is, like the Chinese does the cheap manufacturing for the world, the Chinese in this case was doing the dangerous research for the world. And the apparently harmless bad viruses were being cultured in the labs of Wuhan. And you were trying to make them more lethal. You were trying to make them more dangerous. This is a research which probably started in 2013, 2014, following a mine shaft accident in one of the mine shafts of the Yunnan province. Yunnan province is where the bats are. And the Yunnan area is separated from Wuhan by a distance of 1,500 kilometers. So bats cannot fly for 1,500 kilometers until somebody brings it there. So the bats from the Yunnan province was actually brought to the labs of Wuhan. And this specific body of research, you are an educational institution, so you should be conversant with this term. This term is called gain of function research. So in microbiological and bacteriological domain, this is called a gain of function research. What are you trying to do in gain of function research? In gain of function research, you are trying to overtake nature. Nature in due course can change a harmless virus into a harmful virus. You are as if in a race with nature, and you are trying to tell nature that, look, the function this microorganism could have got in a period of time over the next few years, I'm trying to do it today. You are trying to play God over there. And this is exactly what was happening in the lab. Because the virus, if you remember, has a body, it has the spike proteins. So the entire fiddling around that has taken place so far has happened with the spike proteins. People were playing around with the spike proteins so that the virus could enter into a cell effortlessly. And that is how we transformed a relatively innocuous, harmless bat virus into the SARS-CoV-2. And officially, it was 8th of December 2019 when the first clinical cases were reported in the Wuhan General Hospital. But now there are lots of record in the public domain that tells us that there were cases much, much before that. Clinical cases were coming up, people working in the Wuhan Institute. Wuhan had 2 virology labs, not one. One was private, one was government. The government one was bigger. The chief scientist, a lady, was Zheng Li, Shi Zhengli, her name was. And Shi Zhengli is the noted world expert on in the research on bat viruses. And Shi Zhengli was funded by United States. The fund came from National Institute of Health. The National Institute of Health, which has Anthony Fauci at its helm. So you see the world this has been like globalization. This has been a globalized disaster. So people were paying the Chinese to do the dangerous research. And when they took one chance too many, probably this was hopefully a scientific accident and not an act of scientific intention, the way the virus spread out. So the entire problem was created by the engineered and the altered spike protein. And whenever we talk about variations, mutations, etc., you see all viruses mutate. All viruses have mediation. And since this virus has been a little bit fiddled around by human beings and not entirely natural, this actually has less mutations compared to a lot of other viruses like the influenza virus or the measles virus. So we are scared. Obviously, with mutations, it is acquiring some nasty properties, but it is not mutating as fast as a natural virus would have. It spread across to the world, and the rest of the story is known to all of us. The first wave clinically started. It hit China, then it went to Iran, then Italy, then United States, Europe. And finally, when in India, we were lying back and thinking that, India has good mythology, tremendous politics, a lot of false overconfidence, everything put together, it would never affect India. We had a completely mistimed, wasted lockdown. It made no sense at all in the 24th of March for 78 days. As soon as the lockdown ended, hell broke loose. And we started peaking from July, and the peak of the first wave was somewhere in the middle of September. Now, the first wave peaked in the middle of September. It then started cooling off. It claimed crores and crores of affected infections, lakhs and lakhs of lives. And finally, somewhere in November, it looked as if that the kettle was now cooling down, that the boiling kettle was kind of cooling down. And then again, why did we bring about this catastrophic second wave upon ourselves? Now look, what is a wave? A wave really is a whole lot of infections. And as long as we have a pathogenic, we have a virulent virus, and especially a respiratory virus, if you had a kind of virus that spread through contact or it spread through, say, waterborne diseases, then this virus would take a long time to spread, like Ebola. Ebola that surfaced in mid-2000s. Ebola did have in the regions of Congo, Tangier, etc. It had its area of influence, but it did not spread around that much because Ebola required surface contact to spread. How many of you remember when I was working in medicine in London, etc., in the late 80s, mid 80s, it was the world capital of AIDS. I was called upon to operate on AIDS, lung and lung biopsies and all that throughout our training period. AIDS still exists, but it is quiet now. It has become endemic. But the problem with this business is, so what the scientists were really fiddling around with this virus is to enable this virus to spread without body contact, to make it a respiratory pathogen. And that is like devising a bio-bullet or a bio-weapon, which encompasses you, with that enables a pandemic to happen. Now, fair enough. So during the second wave, you see, the second wave was not inevitable. The second wave was actually seen end of January, early February in a few districts of Maharashtra. It was picked up in the areas around Nasik, Amaravati, but somehow we are good in noticing in hindsight. So the public health mechanisms of Maharashtra and the government of India did not take true cognizance of the fact. And again, there is an institution in India called, not an institution really, it's called a group. The group is called the INSACOG. The INSACOG is a collection of virological institutes who are capable of genomic analysis. And these people were supposed to go around place to place and do genomic samplings. And in their genomic sampling, in India, we are only sampling less than 0.5% of all RT-PCR samples. UK is sampling far more. It is doing about 20% genomic analysis. And United Kingdom is doing even more. But even in what little genomic sampling we did, it was obvious that there was a variant which was brewing in Maharashtra. By this time, we call it the famous Delta variant. And this Delta variant was picked up as early as January. But then again, we had our priorities, we had elections, we had the Kumbh Mela, we had so many things up on the priority list that the government said, look, coronavirus has been scared out of India, we have beaten the hell out of it. So let's get on with things we are good at, like road shows, rallies, dipping in holy water and stuff like that. And there was a full blast on our faces. Officially, the second wave is about twice as big as the first wave. Unofficially, if I look at the healthcare data, I think it is a minimum 4 to 4.5 times bigger than the first wave. And in the last like 2.5 months, we as doctors have never felt more depressed and more helpless in our lives. Because not only were we looking like a bunch of cartoons, not able to give people bed, not able to give people critical care treatment, we were short of oxygen, we were short of medicine. The only thing we were not short of is we had plentiful supply of virus and falsehoods all over the place. So I think in the 74-year-old history of the nation, I think this is the worst 2 months. Some people may put your hands up and say that, what about the lives lost and the bloodshed we saw during Indian independence? I was doing a quick mathematics that if you compare the second wave and the first wave of corona compared to the Indian independence, we are already, I think, 3 times more than the Indian independence in terms of life lost. So this 74-year-old country has been through the worst few months it had ever desired to see in its lifetime. Let us answer a few questions that has been raised so far. Does this virus spread by surface? I think the short answer is no. This virus does not spread by surface. But if you have picked up a good habit of keeping your houses clean and washing your hands and all that, you will do yourself a world of good, because that will prevent you from getting other gastroenterological and other infections. So in the beginning, there were all these fairy tales that were being told that this virus stays alive on a doorknob for about 3 days, etc. That is a whole lot of old wives' tales. It does not. So the only way that this virus spreads only by way of 2 means. One means is that you need to have 2 people who have low levels of protection, about 6 feet between one another, having a conversation, speaking, etc., that allows droplet transmission. What is the size of the virus? About 100 nanometers. What is the size of a droplet? About 200, 250 nanometers or microns plus. And droplets are bigger. Droplets are bigger because droplets contain the virus, it contains water vapor, dust particles, a lot of other things. Why do we wear a mask? Does a mask stop a virus? A mask does not stop a virus usually. What a mask stops is it stops droplets. Because the mask pore size is able to resist the particles which are around 200 microns and upwards. And if it gets much lower, then the mask will not be useful. That is why when we go on our ward round, see patients in a COVID ward, we always use a double mask, and N95, the pore sizes are smaller. So if you're in a high-risk area, like in a medical ward or somewhere else, you are supposed to use an N95. The other mode of transmission that has been mentioned and discussed quite often is the airborne transmission. So if one is a droplet, the airborne transmission, as if it has far smaller particles, it is almost the viruses because of their low density compared to the density of the air in our environment. They can hang around and be floating in the environment for a long time. Now, in normal situations, in outdoor environment, where there is a cross ventilation, where there is a cross wind blowing, it does not matter. Airborne transmission is of no significance in those situations. Where is airborne transmission important? Airborne transmission is important when you have a whole lot of people in a closed space. And that is why, time and again, we are a bit scared about closed, recirculating, air-conditioned environments. Because closed recirculating environments are a little bit doubtful, and try to avoid those, whether it is in a classroom, whether it is an office meeting, etc., etc. And in between the first and the second wave, we did ourselves a lot of harm because when we suddenly got into a mood of ecstasy and started saying that, look, the virus is gone, let's get back to the old party. Your son or daughter was supposed to get married, and you called the familiar close group of 1,000 people for the wedding. That is a death trap. For every 1,000 people who have gathered, you have about 25 to 30 funeral cards which are being printed. So please remember that. Don't, you are welcome to get your son or daughter married, but don't invite people to their own funerals. That is a very cruel thing to do. So don't do that. So this is a word about spread. Airborne is not important in the average situation. Airborne becomes important in close situations. Then regarding the treatment of the viral condition, you see, in the treatment of the viral condition, the medicines, etc., keep on changing. About the treatment itself, we can go on speaking for days, but the fundamental thing to appreciate is that the virus does not harm us by its own presence. You see, if you get a bacterial infection, if you get a pus point somewhere, an infection, an abscess, due to a bacteria, then the problem is being created by the bacteria per se. They're increasing in numbers, causing more tissue death, more pus, more necrosis. That is a bacterial infection. With this viral infection, the virus, goes, multiplies, creates some initial trouble, and then most of the suffering, the white-out lungs, the low oxygen, the high fever, all these business comes from a cycle of altered immunity, which is called the cytokine storm. And in simple words, it is as if somebody is irritating you. You are a teacher, one of your students is irritating you. Instead of scolding that student, you suddenly go and give him one tight slap. Now that is that overreaction. It is like losing your temper and overreacting. So what we are suffering from is not the physical presence of the virus, but the virus is provoking our immune system to behave in a bizarre kind of way. And this bizarre reaction, the excessive altered immune response, is doing more harm than the presence of the virus itself. And that is why all the medicines that we talk about right now, the antivirals were not very good, were not very effective, because the antivirals kicked in from day 3, day 4, etc. You have all these things like favipiravir, remdesivir, etc. They were no good really, because by the time we start taking antivirals, the virus has swam into the system. In those of us, the immune reaction will be acceptable, moderate, we will get by with mild and moderate disease. But whosoever is unlikely, is likely to get that bizarre, excessive, over-the-top immune reaction called the cytokine storm. Hell will break loose. The lungs will white out. Oxygenation will drop. You will end up on getting high flow oxygen, etc., etc. Now, so that is why. What is the bedrock of treatment? What is the mainstay of treatment right now? The mainstay of treatment right now is based on immunomodulators like steroids. We tried things like, for the very wrong reason, the tablet of tocilizumab was in the news. Somebody was peddling tocilizumab in medical college and all that. But forget about the nasty business. The tocilizumab is also an immunomodulator. Then people got a whole lot of good result from using the time-tested steroids. And the data on steroids came out of a wonderful trial called the recovery trial. And it was primarily the British patients in the recovery trial. The British doctors had started using steroids initially and got good results. So the fundamental of management, not everybody needs steroids, remember that. If you've got mild disease, your blood reports are okay, steroids are not obligatory. But where we feel that your symptoms are lasting long, you're getting a lot of high fever, your cough is not getting better, and things like CRP, etc., in your blood tests are on the higher side, I think based on the evidence so far, doctors will recommend steroids for you, and that is seen to work in most cases. Uh, Regarding treatment, I think, it's almost a never-ending story, but there has been a lot of hoo-ha, justifiably, with this thing called black fungus, mucormycosis and all that. Mucormycosis fungus is not really black. Anything you don't like, you call it black. So I don't know why, but that's a funny habit. It's actually pretty colorless and pretty white. Fungal infections, fungus are there all around the environment. The fact that you and I are alive today is thanks to a fungus, because from a fungus came the world's first antibiotic, penicillin. It came from the fungus Penicillus gyrus. So funguses are always there. Virus is the smallest, then a bacteria, then a virus. So the fungus suddenly seeks an opportunity where the immunity is low. Why is the immunity low? Because our body's immune reaction has been improper. We probably have had a good amount of steroids, and particularly if you have uncontrolled diabetic, your diabetes may have been controlled before, but when you take a large dose of steroids, etc., the sugar shoots up, and all this is very inviting for the opportunistic fungal infections. So you get all these black, white, yellow, blue, and every day one more headline in the newspaper. For a while, we thought that since there was a lot of industrial oxygen use this time in India, because the oxygen usage in India, which is about, say, 1,000 tons a day, during the first wave went up to 3,000 tons. During the second wave, it went up to about 10,000 tons. So we were woefully short of oxygen. You read all the horror stories. And the steel, the heavy industry saved us, because we all borrowed oxygen from the steel and heavy industry. But the steel and heavy industry oxygen is quite pure oxygen. It's 1% purer than our medical oxygen. So that is not to blame as far as this is concerned. Where do we move on from here? So have we managed second wave reasonably well in hospitals? My answer is no. Why haven't? We really need two things medically. What we need is, we definitely, should you be unlucky to get the disease, try to be clever, try to not to get the disease in the first place. If you do get it, then we need to get a lot more cleverer with our research into antiviral drugs. Certain intranasal antiviral drugs are being developed which are showing promise. There are about 5 or 6 in the pipeline at this point of time. Let's see what happens. The other thing why we did not get better is because delayed testing, late presentation, etc. Because even though you read the records, you say that second wave has a slightly higher mortality of about 1.7, 1.8%. That is only half the truth, because it is 1.7, 1.8% in terms of case fatality. I am interested in what is the mortality in hospital population. In hospital population, the mortality is much, much higher. It's in excess of 10%. So it still remains a very lethal, troublesome disease, especially for those who get to hospitals. Are vaccines helping? Vaccines, of course, are helping. There is a joke going around where people believe that actually vaccines were manufactured much before. Like Sinovac, it's very popular and effective Chinese vaccine, very similar to Covaxin. That was probably manufactured a year before, when the Wuhan lab had started playing around with this virus. But then the others came, the most popular in India being the Astra or the Covishield. Covishield, the adenovector intermediate vaccine, is actually a product of Ebola research. 75% of the work was done during the Ebola period. Then Ebola died out. And after Ebola died out, they had obviously abandoned. Nobody was putting money into Ebola vaccine. So Jenner Institute had stopped that research. And that was revived when the SARS-CoV-2 came in. And they were very clever people with Sarah Gibson, etc. Sarah Gilbert and company. They just cut and paste the Ebola 2 technology, adapted it for SARS-CoV-2, and it was pretty effective. Very similar almost a mirror image of that is Sputnik, which is again an adenovector intermediate. Being an adenovector intermediate, Sputnik is a little sharper because they use a different adenovector carrier in the second dose compared to the first dose. So their first and second dose are not exactly the same. But the problem with both Covaxin, which is attenuated virus, and Sputnik is they still haven't submitted their detailed phase 3 data, and therefore the FDA, the WHO, is not giving them the approved stamp of approval. So if you have a scientific bent of mind, you would definitely want them to give it soon. The other vaccines, which probably have had a lot of usage, about 10 billion people in the world have got vaccinated so far overall. And about 30% of that vaccination has come from the mRNA vaccine. If there has been one significant technology breakthrough in this period of time, this has been the mRNA vaccine, because mRNA is hitting the bullseye. It is just hitting the messenger RNA, which is generated by the spike protein. It is far more targeted and shows good results. mRNA vaccine's efficacy is very good, both Pfizer and Moderna. They do have a troublesome side effect, which is it causes inflammation of the heart muscle cells, myocarditis, in a very small number of people, but it has been detected. Since it is not used in India, we haven't got the exact statistical incidence that why it causes viral myocarditis. It does cause it. With AstraZeneca or Covishield, say about 1 billion of these vaccines have been used in 4 young women. The bad side effect of venous thrombosis in the brain was picked up, but incidence is very low. If you happen to be in Europe, then the European Union would hesitate in giving young women Covishield vaccine. So if you are very picky, if you are very choosy, if you have a choice at all between Covaxin and Covishield, then probably in young women, Covishield may be slightly better. The common, I think, gentleman asked the question, what about 3 months after? You see, if you want to be microbiologically correct, then anybody who has had what you call the disease, the RT-PCR proved COVID, probably should not be given the vaccine. But we are unsure because, if you're getting 10 viruses in the vaccine, you've had 1,000 viruses when you have the disease. So you should already have ample and plenty antibodies on store. So why are you taking, after you've had 1,000 viruses, why would you want 10 more into our system? But since we are still not sure, we are still not based on very granular data as far as vaccine and antibody is concerned, people erred on the side of safety and said, fair enough, even if you've had COVID, take your vaccine 3 months later. It's a bit of a, facetious, whether it is 10 days here or there, it doesn't matter. But from the day you had the first fever, calculate 15 days. That should be your period of recovery. After your period of recovery, count 90 days, go and take the vaccine, right? But once more antibody level in population serosurvey data emerge, then probably in the near future, I have a feeling that people who got the disease may not be given the vaccine. We are maybe overcooking it a little bit. What else were your questions about the age group? Yes, in India currently we are struggling with the vaccine supplies. We are not doing very well on the vaccine supplies. We are only vaccinating at about average of 30-35 lakhs per day. A lot of people ask us the question that what is India's desired rate of vaccination? That is almost like asking somebody the question, how pretty do you want your wife to be? There isn't a number you can put to it. But the effectivity of vaccination, that will have one correlation, And that correlation is when the next spike comes, how tall is the spike going to be? So if you want the next blip, there will be a next blip. But if the next blip will be, you want it to be, the lower you want the next wave or the next spurt, the more you want the number of vaccination. And there is some calculation going around that in order to have a very flat second wave, we needed to be vaccinating at 80, 90 lakhs per day. But today we are vaccinating around 30 lakhs per day. We are told the supplies will improve. Let's hope so. But even if we push around 60 lakhs per day, we have a reasonable chance of getting out of an angry third wave. Hope not. When is the third wave expected? Well, anybody's guess, but if you look at, there is something called the inter-peak interval. If you look at the peak of the first wave in India, we had it in the middle of September. The peak of the second wave came somewhere in May. So between the two waves, we had India's behavioral peak-to-peak difference was around 7.5 months. So by that calculation, it will probably be somewhere in November or December. If you want to be a flat, if you want it to be a flat third wave, what you and I need to do is obviously keep up with masking, avoid crowds, behaving ourselves, avoid great big meetings and marriages. What does the government need to do? The government needs to stop all this, slippages and breakages, hit the accelerator with vaccination, avoid dipping into holy water, lakhs and lakhs of people, avoid disastrous 2-month-long elections and stupid things like that. And what the government really, really seriously needs to do is that the rate of infection may be decreasing, but do not take the eye off the wall, do not reduce the number of testing. Even if you find out one person who has tested positive, be aggressive, jump in, test the 20, 25 other people around that person. Because the more you test, countries which have not allowed their test numbers to drop with decrease in infection rate have avoided subsequent waves. This is like saying that between one theft or robbery in your house and the next one, a theft has already happened. Fair enough. There has been no robbery for the last 7 days. So I'm going to put my security guard to sleep. If you do so, obviously you make yourself far more vulnerable for the next act of theft or robbery. So our public health mechanism needs to be absolutely on the ball and ensure the fact that our peak infectivity rate was around 30%, 40% plus. Now it has come down to 7%, 8%, 5%. But because it has come to 5%, take the case of Bengal. Bengal never tested well, never tested well. Whilst Delhi as a city was testing more than 1 lakh a day, I think we hit 65, 70,000 highest. Already we have come down to 50,000 a day. Now, because if you see today's infection number is 3,000, you say, okay, my job is done, I'm going to relax. Tomorrow I'm going to test 20,000. That is a trap. That is a booby trap. That is exactly what the virus wants you to do. The more complacent you get, you miss the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 infection. And over a period of time, these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 infections by the binomial spread will spread out again and present in front of us like a big box on the face, another wave again, which we do not want to happen. So get out there. We have to get on with our life and living, because at the end of the day, a dead body is a dead body. Whether the dead body is from a bad lung or an empty stomach, it does not matter. The country is struggling very badly economically. And how long can the tax on fuel, petrol and diesel sustain this country? God alone knows. So we have to get on with our act, but let us do it with sense. Let us do it carefully. In an educational institution, you were ruling about the fact that young not getting vaccinated. Well, it's a difficult issue, you see. We probably will do well to cover 50% of the 18 plus with one shot vaccination in the whole of this year. 12, 13 plus should get vaccinated. I honestly don't see it happening before 2022 because there are not that many vaccines around. And before we close up for the day, there's been a lot of scare stories going in the press that when the next spike comes, the children will get affected selectively. No, they will never get affected selectively. A child's immunity is a gift of nature. It is completely different. Why did we see more children this time? Because obviously you saw more people this time. If in a locality you had 100 infections last time, you've got 500 infections this time, then obviously the proportion of children will be more. It is mathematics. But the percentage of children who fell desperately sick was very, very low. So there will be a differentiation. There will be a kind of segmentation between the protected and the unprotected, between the vaccinated and the non-vaccinated. So you may look at it this way, that out of, say, 200 people, if 100 got vaccinated and 100 did not, then the 100 unprotected will definitely prone to be in the lower age groups. So obviously, we have to be far more careful with them. But there is no reason to believe that, like the biblical curse of Moses or something, that this virus will go around only affecting children. Hospitals are getting ready with pediatric care facilities and ventilators. We have to, because we have not shown great preparation in the last few occasions. So I think how bad will our next experience be depends. I think it is like even stakeholding. It's like a 50-50 split. 50% of that steering wheel and accelerator is in our hands. It just depends on how sensible, careful, cautious you and I are. And if there is one thing you can do to prevent the next wave, which is get yourself, your family, everybody eligible vaccinated. Get 20 more people vaccinated who are around you, because you are only as safe as your ecosystem. Do not forget that. So be selfless. Whether it is your relative, your homeless, your driver, your chauffeur, your vegetable wala, your cleaner, whoever it is, give back to the world, what you owe to them. So get 20 more people vaccinated. Forget about the government free and paid politics. That can wait for another day. If you've got to lose government, you've got to lose government. What the hell can you do about it? And there will be a request from the citizen to the government that please avoid all the foolishness we did last time around. Okay, the government, probably the political parties were probably wrong to ask 5 lakh people to go to Brigade Parade Ground. But was I one of the stupid clowns to have gone to Brigade Parade Ground to add to that singular act of infamy? That blame lies on my door. So we cannot escape everything we do just by saying, pointing a finger at one another. So, friends, I think I've tried to give you some information in a nutshell, and probably most of you would be asleep by this time. So it's time to wake up and ask us a few questions if you have any, and what little a stupid cardiac surgeon knows, I'll try my level best to answer your question.
So there are already, thank you very much, sir. There are already some questions waiting in the pipeline. So I would just,
I'll take about 4 or 5, because
sure, sir. Sure. Yeah, because already you have answered few. So there has been, this is from IQAC coordinator, Dr. Samrat Bhattacharya.
Yes.
And he's asking that there has been a trials on administering 2 different vaccines, which is supposed to enhance immunogenicity. How far do you think this works?
Well, my short answer is, honestly, we don't know yet, but that is really a leap of faith into the dark. This is like, when I saw the news as well, and I thought probably Ramdev was trying it out, because I don't see much science in it, because we know, honestly, look, let us be sensible. Let us know a little bit more about the pathogenicity. let us know a little bit about the immunogenicity. I think the time when we solve the riddle, the puzzle of the cytokine storm caused by this virus, which is accounting each and every one of the 4 lakh lives lost in our country or 40 lakh lives lost the world over, has been lost to this one issue. And I did not want to say that, but if you want to know God's own truth, then the truth is in treating COVID, a doctor is holding a pencil torch in a dark, deep forest. So before we fool around and like fruit juices try to make vaccines, there are many more important things we need to know. We still do not know the immunopathogenicity of the virus. We do not. We are using steroids. When were steroids first used? Steroids were used more than 100 years back. So if you and I are so clever, why are we depending on a form of treatment which is centuries old, right? So there's a lot more fundamental work. The trouble is, stupid people like me have come to medicine. All the young boys and girls today who goes into the stock market and share market and globalized financial frenzy, if they came into intellectual areas, probably you had the answers first. We are largely ignorant. We are largely ignorant as the clinical behavior of this business is concerned. So let us not fool around. So I would certainly not fool around with those things because there is far more basic science research to be done. We in medicine, ever since Hippocrates wrote his thing in 5th century BC, for those of you who are interested, you can look. My book has just been released 5 days back. It's called The Sickness of Health, where I discuss the history and the journey of medicine in India over the last 200 years. It's called The Sickness of Health. You can read up the history of medicine over there. So it's been about 200 years when a doctor is facing a disease he knows nothing about. This is like today, what we are doing is like treating malaria before Ronald Ross. So before we get into this kind of acrobatics, there is a lot more basic science we need to decipher. We are struggling. We are badly struggling. Yes, please.
Thank you, sir. So there has been a question by Miss Kirti, and she's asking that I'm a professor and also a cancer survivor. Is it safe for me to take classes in the college rooms without wearing masks, as it is difficult to? As she faces difficult.
Madam, I'm not trying to be funny with you, but apart from those few seconds in our lives where we feel hopelessly romantic, apart from those few seconds, please don't take off your mask for any activity. So please don't. So get into the habit. If any one of us are feeling, I'm well past that age. But if anyone is far more younger to me and feeling hopelessly romantic, you can do that. But and even before you do that, you please be sure you know about the other fellow's health status. So if you're unsure, control yourself. If you're not, keep your mask off. At least in the next 1 year, I don't see any condition in life. The whole thing is one thing, it's like searching for a terrorist. Whether you are in hospitals, when we talk to one another, when I speak to my colleagues, when I operate, because I have a lot of trouble breathing with the mask on. I have DNS, deviated nasal septum. I struggle. But we draw a little bit of comfort because everybody is vaccinated. We happen to know how everybody is doing. In my unit, we run Asia's biggest ECMO unit. That is the highest form of life support you can give a human being. It is 10 times higher than a ventilator. So in that kind of a place, 200 people work. We have 3 critical care. You've seen 1 ICU, we have 3 ICUs. And when I do a ward round through the unit, I'm walking through 200, 250 healthcare staff. So in those situations, of course, wear an N95, wear a double mask. PPEs, I don't wear PPEs. PPE is a practice that came from Ebola virus because Ebola comes from contact. So please, and especially, as I told you, probably I don't know whether I said or not, but when people open public transport, in very few cities in the world have you ever seen a spike of infection. But whenever you open schools and colleges, you've seen spikes of infection because you had this cross transmission in a static population from a carrier state to an active state. We still don't know why. There are a lot of things we still don't know why. So I would strongly not advise. So please don't. I've got my mask off because I'm alone in this room right now. The moment one chap walks in, I'll probably, I'm not very comfortable with masks, but I haven't got a choice. Yes, please.
Yeah. So there's a question by Sri Maloy Banerjee, and who's asking that, is it possible to get some data about the number of deaths told due to post-COVID related complications, as it is an important information to understand the actual fatality of COVID-19?
Well, you've thrown a stone. You have thrown a stone in the hornet's nest, because the COVID fatality data is a very contentious topic in India. So right now we are discussing as to, you look at this 380,000 figure. Now, whether in reality that actual acute deaths are into 10 or into 20 is the actual question. That is the acute phase deaths. This 390,000 is somebody's figment of imagination. You can forget about it. Now, the actual death data that is important scientifically regarding COVID is what are the number of excess deaths. So if you are interested in looking up death data, do a little bit of, I'm sure you have, look at the excess death data. Supposing you discuss the first lockdown in that phase, in India, how many people die every day? 30,000 people die every day in India. If you calculate our death rate, population of 130 crores, the daily death rate in India is 130,000, not 130, 30,000. So till 31,000 people have died in India, you do not have an excess death. And during lockdown, supposing in a certain day 5,000 people died of COVID, but if you are in a lockdown mode, you have prevented 7,000 deaths from road traffic accidents. So if you look at excess deaths, you've not had excess deaths, you've actually saved lives. So it is a statistical puzzle. How many people die in West Bengal every day? In West Bengal, the daily deaths is about 2,500 to 3,000. So today, if I say 90 people die out of COVID, I don't believe that figure. Say it is not 90, it is 200. 200 people died out of COVID. Epidemiologically, the important answer is, the question is that whether these deaths are excess deaths or not. That is important. Post-COVID deaths is difficult. Why is post-COVID deaths difficult? Because any disease, if you've recovered from it like 15 days, 30 days, you may have died of heart failure after that, once you are COVID negative. So will you call it a COVID death or will you call it a heart failure death? Probably most countries will not call it a COVID death. Right? Post-COVID disease and disability is important, but beyond 15 days, if you died of, say, a neurological problem, a lung infection, etc., probably most, and if at that point of time, you are COVID. I've seen people who are COVID positive for 1 month. There is somebody whom I've operated on 4 patients who had active COVID. I've held a COVID lung in my hand. If you hold a COVID lung in your hand, it is like holding a 2-kilogram brick. A lung is soft, it's like sponge. I was operating on somebody whose lung was tearing from COVID. And you hold that lung in your hand, it's like solid brick. So anyway, coming back to your mortality data, I think the actual matrix with which the mortality insult of COVID on different countries and societies will be measured by is the excess mortality. In the second wave, have we had excess mortality? Yes, you have, by a large margin. But if you try to follow the government statistics, like in 3 months you had 4 lakh deaths, it'll actually be a very funny mathematical problem. You may end up calculating that there has been no excess mortality. That is what people go by. Yes, please.
So one of the last questions, maybe this has been asked from far away from Rajasthan by Sri Badri Vishal Jangid, and he has written it in Hindi. So I'm going to conduct one kind of a note of C. Please pardon my inability. COVID-19 में मानसिक विकृतियां सामने आई हैं. इसके लिए आप अपने विचार, like if you could put some light on that, like kind of mental illness that has come due to COVID, or the kind of mental disability, and how far the vaccination is effective in this. That is what maybe he has wanted to say.
Look, you see, mental stress is definitely tremendous in COVID. COVID has put in fear, COVID has put in anxiety, COVID has put in depression. And the reason, as all of us know, you don't need to be a doctor to answer this question, is because it has hit people at both ends, both life and living. Any respiratory pandemic, whether it is due to COVID or whether it is due to a Royal Bengal tiger, any respiratory pandemic will curtail human behavior and movement. Today, your and my life is based on a rat race. We are not the hunters and gatherers of 120,000 years ago anymore, right? So anything that hits that, it knocks off the entire supply chain of biological existence. And when that happens, we will become, there will be a physical part of the disease, and there is bound to be a psychological part of the disease. And how to overcome it, I think we just have to keep on believing that tomorrow will be better than today. And we have to be faithful to our own hierarchy of responsibilities. Okay, there are some days in the beginning, we were pretty scared of going to the hospital. But then I am responsible to the 50, 60 people who work in my team. How can I go and stand in front of them if I've been hiding in my hole? I've not missed, ever since March of last year, I've not missed a single day in hospital. I've not. Pardon me for saying so. There are many case conferences of renowned government specialists and all that. And there was recently a case conference where 10 people from some great government center was advising on a patient. And I counted that 10 people put together probably have not seen 5 patients in their life. So we cannot be backroom warriors. I've not missed a day in hospital. So we owe it to our lives. And look at it this way, is there anybody you know who has not died?
Yes.
So don't think about dying, think about why. Otherwise, you will end up, which in Bengali it is called the Subhash Bose syndrome. You ask anybody about Subhash Bose, they'll tell you how he died and how he didn't come back. You ask anybody, why was the man alive? What did he do for the 20 years he was in politics? They'll keep mum. So don't be remembered for dying, be remembered for being alive. That's what we are here for. And death is the only certainty. Whether you die out of pandemic or die out of being run over by a bulldozer is a different problem. These are the challenges of our times, and we owe it to our young people. We owe it to them. We've made a mess of the situation by letting this virus leak from the lab. Whose fault it is? Our lab, our fault. It's not their fault, is it? Think about all these school and college children. So the way they knew of life has completely been messed about. But I'm sure they're clever people. They're much more cleverer than we are. So they will come, they will probably recover much faster than we have.
So probably the last question in this session that is been asked by Sri Shumon Maji, and he's been asking that, sir, that he's from a village area, rural area, and the availability of vaccine is much low, and we are not informed quite a lot about the vaccination, and the vaccine centers did not work in our area. So what should we actually do? And sir, this is also an addition from my end that a significant portion of the Indian population does not know how to use CoWIN app, but that is also been treated as a gateway to get your jab. Sir, how to go about it?
That's I honestly, this is like having online education in a country which has 30% digital penetration. So it just shows that how much policymakers know the country for which they're trying to make the policy. I share your problem. And Shuman Babu, who you asked a question, the advice to you will be that look, that when it rains badly in the middle of a storm, you look for a shelter. Wherever you are, run to the nearest vaccination place you're looking for, whether it is for 500 rupees, 600 rupees, 1,000 rupees. I mean, it's a different story. I don't want to get into all that tale right now. But really, the government has absolved its responsibilities of universal vaccination. It has made it into a very cash and carry process as far as cities are concerned. I really fear for the rural because we will end up existing in pseudo bubbles. The cities will have much, much higher rates of vaccination. Probably the impact of subsequent disease in the cities will be less, but that doesn't mean that we forget about villages. So raise the alarm. Wherever you are not getting vaccination, please raise the alarm. And if you want to be a little bit selfish, take yourself and your nearest people who are with you. There are many vaccination centers in the city, especially the private ones, which have a lot of capacity to spare. So honestly, it's not a good thing to say. It doesn't make you feel very happy to say that. But look, this is the best 1,000 rupees you would have spent in your lives. It is not a good thing. It's not an ethical thing. It's not a moral thing to be saying in a country. But please get yourself vaccinated. And I really hope and wish that the rural vaccination picks up.
Thank you very much. I think here we end up the session. And what else can I say for this wonderful, I would say, in a more lucid deliberation where so many dark areas related to COVID has been addressed and the clouds are getting clearer. So I'm in no position to describe the efficacy of this particular lecture session, but there are a few points that I would like to share that Sir has very clearly pointed out that when we have tried to play or try to fool around with nature, then nature teaches us in a hard way. And this is a catastrophe which is caused by the Chinese, funded by the USA, and suffered by the whole common people.
Well said. Well said.
And encouraging us, Sir has encouraged us to be aggressive and proactive about this disease, and we need to just be proactive about treating this, as once upon a time Brazilians believed that offense is the best defense. So thank you very much, Sir, for being here and enumerating and enlightening us regarding this unknown phenomena called COVID-19, the myth, the legend. Now I'd request our respected Professor Dr. Samrat Bhattacharya, Coordinator IQAC, to lead us into vote of thanks.
Thank you, Pinaki. I hope I am audible.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are, sir.
It is indeed a pleasure to accord a vote of thanks in this August gathering. I would begin by expressing my gratitude to our speaker, Dr. Kunal Sarkar, Senior Renowned Cardiac Surgeon, for accepting our invitation and for sharing his valuable and very critical thoughts on the prevailing pandemic situation. With his immense knowledge and expertise, he has enriched all of us. Thank you, sir, for accepting our invitation and for being present with us today virtually. I would like to thank Dr. Shopan Kumar Mukherjee, Secretary of the College Council, our Principal, Dr. Madhumanjari Mondal, and our Vice Principal, Dr. Supratim Das, for their patronage. I would like to put my token of appreciation to our Bursar and Teachers Council Secretary for their support. My personal thanks to all my colleagues in the Department of Business Administration, especially the very dynamic Head of Department, Professor Vibhash Acharya, for organizing this webinar and for collaborating with the Internal Quality Assurance Cell. My thanks to Dr. Shushmita Gonsalves for reading the prayer and Sri Pinaki Mondal for so efficiently conducting today's program, as he has always done. I will be failing in my duty if I do not mention the names of Shaptarshi Chakraborty and Shushobhan Paul for rendering technical assistance to run the webinar on virtual platform. Finally, I am grateful to all our participants, our former principal, Dr. Orpita Mukherjee, guests, academicians, researchers, faculty members, and the students for their gracious presence, without which this webinar would not have been possible. In the end, my sincere apologies for any inconvenience which might have been caused to anyone during the course of organizing this webinar. Thank you all once again for being such a wonderful audience. And please, as Sir has said, do take care of yourself and the people around you. Thank you.
And last but not the least, I would like to thank Dr. Samrat Bhattacharya for always giving us a fantastic end, because a good end is as important as the good beginning. And we believe in having the best in the business all around. Thank you, sir. And thank you, everyone, for making this small initiative a great success. Thank you for your presence. Thank you very much.